everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on the fourth light novel for Kuroko's Basketball, and my notes aren't getting any shorter. Oh my gosh, I really have been enjoying these light novels. I was very unsure going into these. I was like, I don't know what it's going to be like reading these and what we're going to find out, if it's going to be worth it. No, not only are these light novels all interconnected, as we're finding out, but they have been very informative about little character traits with the characters that I hadn't thought of before, that I'm like, okay, all right, cool, great. So the fourth novel actually has taken me the longest to get through so far, because there was a lot of notes to take. I think I've taken more notes with this light novel than any, and there was even a chapter I couldn't get to, so I was like, oh my gosh. But the fourth light novel has this wonderful picture of all of the, it's mainly just Teiko players on it, which is fun, because every novel so far started out with a chapter on Teiko, which is great. But basically there's a number of different translators for this one that I will go throughout and name, but I do want to give a special shout out to Truck. Thank you, Truck, for putting this all together and sending me the links. If you're on the Discord with us on Patreon, if you go to the Kuroko's Basketball channel and you go to the pins, there is a pinned document that has all the Google Docs with all the copies of light novels on them, so you can read them yourself for free, translated into English, which is amazing. So thank you, Truck, for putting that all together. You're amazing. Thank you. But yeah, so basically this light novel has 5 chapters. We're going to talk about 4 of them. There's actually a little Omeki extra chapter at the end, so it's like 4.5 chapters that we're going to talk about. And one chapter I have a description of, but was very unsuccessful with finding manga chapter equivalencies of. So yeah, so chapter 1, we might as well just go ahead and talk through this novel, because I've got a lot of notes to get through. But yeah, these light novels have all been interconnected. There have been chapters that have been mentioned in one light novel that are referenced in others, and this is a major novel that does that. It references some chapters back in other light novels. So it's very smart marketing wise, because you got to get the full set to have the full picture of what's going on. And not only that, but there's like all these different timeline threads that are going throughout the novels, and then they are really like little vignettes. I've really enjoyed seeing them so far. Honestly, the first chapter, knowing that it's a Teiko chapter, I'm like, well, what are we gonna get, right? And this light novel surprisingly has a lot going on with Akashi. Which I'm sure going into this, people were like, oh, Romania's gonna get to read an Akashi novel. And he's not prominent in it, but he's in it. Well, yes, he's not in it completely, but he is prominent throughout this light novel. And I was like, all right, I'm here for extra Akashi material. Let's go. Let's get this. So basically, we start talking through the Generation of Miracles. There's the interviewing process that's being talked about, and the middle schoolers are getting interviewed, like we were given hints at in the manga and in the anime, and we see their reactions to the title Generation of Miracles. Murray Sakibara doesn't really care about it. He's like, I don't care. Midorima's just like, Midorima's catchphrase is naturally. He says that a lot in the manga English translations. He says naturally a lot, like at the end of sentences. So Midorima just believes that they've done all this hard work, so it's only natural that they are the Generation of Miracles. Amine is confused about the title, because in the translation it's like the Miracle Generation, and he's like, shouldn't this be worded the... Amine was just confused. Kisei is like Murasaki Bara. He doesn't really care about the title. And Akashi just politely says, they'll keep doing what they're doing to maintain the title, of course. Like, okay, Akashi. Akashi has like a Valentina levels of delusion in this volume, but it's kind of amazing. We'll talk about it. So the chapter jumps to the start of their second year. We're in the second year of middle school before things go awry. And Kisei and Kuroko reminisce about their first meeting, and they talk about the new recruits at Teiko, which is kind of a cool angle that they're talking about them getting recruits for Teiko, because we don't really see that in the anime or manga, so it's nice to see them reference it, that they are thinking about it. It is a little sad to see Kisei talk about, like at one point, Kuroko offers him a cookie, like he had some cookies, like, here you go, Kisei. He's like, oh no, I can't eat it, my modeling career. And it is a little bit sad, as someone that went through a very unhealthy period of eating at one point. I didn't have anorexia necessarily, but I did go through a period where I was not making good healthy choices about what I was eating or not eating because of how I wanted my body to appear, and it just was not healthy at all. And luckily I'm out of that. Luckily I'm in a much better place in terms of that. But it really broke my heart to see Kisei talk about that like it, and it was like, oh man, you should have that cookie. Like screw that. Beauty standards are for hell. No. And so then they changed the topic, but it was really sad. I was like, I didn't like seeing that, like, Kisei have body image issues, which really doesn't get focused on in the anime at all. So I thought that was interesting. So they talk about that, Kisei says that Akashi wanted to talk to Kuroko. And so they need to go find Akashi because he wanted to talk to him about something. So then Kuroko runs into his partner, Almine. In the chapter, Kuroko calls Almine his partner, and it's just like feeding the Aokuro vibes, like just the ship is getting fed, the agenda is being fulfilled. It's great. And they lament that they have all these new schedules now, and since they're second years, and Kuroko doesn't know where Akashi's class is. So Almine, he actually dozes off while talking to him, which brings up this really interesting point. Almine dozes off while Kuroko is like lamenting not being able to find Akashi, and Kuroko has to be like, hey, wake up. And he's like, oh, sorry. He's like, I fall asleep easily when it doesn't have anything to do with basketball. And I thought of two things. One, I was like, is that related to possibly the depression Almine gets into? Or two, is he Jinx Monsoon? Does he have narcolepsy? I'm like, is that a real thing? Like, when people think of narcolepsy, they think that, oh, they just fall asleep on the spot. But I'm like, low-key, could Almine have narcolepsy like the drag queen Jinx Monsoon? Like, I've been watching Drag Race the last several months, and Jinx, like, talks about narcolepsy being, like, the stigma against it, and being like, no, sometimes you just, when you're not stimulated, you get sleepy, and you kind of just fall asleep sometimes on the spot, and then you wake up. Which is exactly what happens to Almine in this chapter. So, I'm like, maybe Almine has narcolepsy. Maybe him sleeping on the rooftop is just something that happens. It's interesting. But then Kuroko's worried about Almine in his classes. He's like, are you going to be okay if you're falling asleep in class? He's like, I'm fine. It's like, but it's good to see Kuroko cares about Almine and he's concerned. So Momoe, of course, shows up and seems to know where Akashi's class is. Midorima shows up as well. And it's funny because Kuroko, like, he calls Midorima by his nickname that Momoe gave him, and Almine loses it. He just thinks that's the funniest thing in the world, and Midorima's like all huffy, like, you don't get to call me that, Kuroko. It's great. And so while they're looking, they all go together and start looking for Akashi, and while they're doing this, they debate on what Akashi would possibly want with Kuroko. Like, why would he want to meet with them? And they talk about their hobbies, and Kuroko reveals that he knows that Midorima plays the piano. That's like one of his hobbies. And he tells Momoe and them that he's been observing everybody over the course of the last year, as Akashi's been telling him to, which is kind of cool to see, like, he's been, like, practicing with that. And then they also talk about Midorima's obsessions with horoscopes. And this is the moment that Midorima finds out that Kuroko is an Aquarius. And it's so funny. Like, Midorima freaks out. He's instantly like, wait, you're an Aquarius? You must move a meter away from me immediately. I just love, he puts like a meter restraining order against Kuroko in the moment. He's like, no, you cannot be near me. Aquariuses are not compatible with Cancers. It's like, oh my God. It was so funny. I love Midorima's instant freak out. It was great. So Almine and Kuroko leave Momoe and Midorima after that point, and they find out that they think Akashi's at the student council meeting, and it turns out he's not. We find out, though, that Akashi's a member of a lot of committees. He's a member of the student council. He's a member of the Teiko Festival Executive Committee. He's in the sampling committee. He's in like a bunch of different committees, and he's always gone at meetings when he's not in class or he's not at basketball practice, which, you know, that kind of feeds into the idea of Akashi kind of being this perfectionist and wanting to overachieve. But it's like, if I was in middle school on 4 different committees, as an instructor or as a mentor, I'd be like, you can say no. It's okay. But no, Akashi doesn't want to. He wants to take it all on, right? So they run into Murasaki, who just casually is like, oh yeah, Akashi's like always busy. He's hard to catch out of practice. I'm trying to think of like drag queens they'd all would be. If Almine was Jinx Monsoon, Murasaki would be Alaska. Bar none. Oh my God, I don't even know. Midorima would be hard to place. I'd have to think about this. I'm going to probably talk in the Discord about what drag queens each of them would be. But Murasaki would be Alaska. And Almine would be Jinx Monsoon For sure. But I have to think about the others. I will probably talk in the Patreon Discord about what this could be, and we'll have a conversation about it. It'll be great. But yeah. So they have a hard time finding out where he is. We also find out that Murasaki Bara, I'm sure it was mentioned before, but it gets brought up in this chapter, is the youngest child. He has an older sister and 3 older brothers. And now anytime like siblings are mentioned, I'm like, I want to see a picture of all the siblings. So I want to see Murasaki Bara's family. Are they all tall? Is Murasaki Bara the only freakishly tall one? Like, I want to see them. Do they all play sports? I want to know. And so Amina and Kuroko, they finally go to the basketball club meeting thinking Akashi's going to be there. But no, it's Nijimura and the 3rd years all gathered. So this takes place right before Nijimura leaves from being captain. Nijimura like tries to crack a joke with Kuroko and them, but it doesn't go over well because apparently Nijimura rarely jokes, so everybody's kind of like freaked out by it. Which I like that the extras, I'm just now in the manga, of course, getting to meet Nijimura, so I like that we get more with his character and we find out that he has a really dry personality, which is interesting. And so Nijimura notes that Haizaki has caused trouble again. Now, we noted in the manga last week that Haizaki was frequently like in a lot of trouble and like got into like a fist fight with a kid outside of the team. And so I'm going to quote part of the text here saying, according to a report from Akashi heard by Nijimura, Haizaki beat his schoolmate into a hospital and had to be enrolled in the hospital for 3 weeks. There's no definitive evidence that Haizaki is the cause, so even the teacher of the student has gotten the exact information. And the translation of these chapters are a little bit weird sometimes, so you have to kind of like read between the lines. But the anime does not make Haizaki out to be as violent and a problem as he is in the manga and in the extras. I'm like, the fact that he beat a kid, his own schoolmate, to the hospital for 3 weeks, yeah. While I do find Nijimura being like really adamant about trying to help Haizaki stay on the team, it does make more sense now why Akashi was like, no, you gotta go, like you're a problem. But to that effect, I want to talk about this more because Nijimura says they shouldn't have to worry about it and it's Nijimura's problem to mess with. I wonder if Nijimura, because he seems to connect with Haizaki a bit, if we find out Haizaki in the manga has a single mom, so he doesn't have a father figure in his life, it seems like maybe it's like a turnkey situation. A latchkey situation, rather. I wonder if maybe Nijimura thought that Haizaki had a bad home life, and he was trying to get Haizaki to stick with basketball as a sanctuary, as a safe space that would keep Haizaki out of trouble. I definitely could see that being the case. I feel like maybe Nijimura was like, hey, you're like a delinquent, but if you have something that gives you meaning, maybe you won't be so violent. Maybe you won't act up so much. So it seemed like Nijimura was trying to get Haizaki to get basketball to be like his sanctuary. And then once Nijimura left, Akashi was like, I don't have time for this. Bye. And didn't want to mess with it, which fair for Akashi, I guess, right? I mean, at this point, it definitely seems like Nijimura and Akashi saw very different things than Haizaki. I respect both of them. I really respect Nijimura for trying to help Haizaki find a place and make himself better. And I do respect Akashi making the decision being like, you are violent to the point where you're hurting people. This is not going to be conducive to good teamwork. So it's a bad situation all around, right? But I do think I personally empathize more with Nijimura trying to help him as somebody that like has done mediation and works in advisement, and you know, you have health and wellness training. Nijimura's way is the way you should go. You should try to reach out to kids like Haizaki and give them a safe space and a place with camaraderie and stuff. And if they don't accept it, there's only so much you can do, but you shouldn't give up on them. But then on the other hand, I get where Akashi's coming from. So I personally would probably be Nijimura in this situation, but I know people that would be Akashi and I get it. So there's that. But anyway, Almina and Kuroko, they go off to find Akashi since he's not there, and the 3rd years reveal that they know Nijimura is about to step down as captain and make Akashi captain instead. And what's interesting is the 3rd years they lament. They're like, oh, we're going to miss you, Nijimura. We don't want you to leave. And Nijimura kind of blows it off. He scoffs. He's like, oh, no. He's like, I'm not leaving the team. I'm just stepping down. He's like, and this is my decision to make. But it does feel like he really didn't want to step down and it was a hard decision. The way that the novel portrays it, it seems like Nijimura didn't really want to do this, but because of his family situation, he's like, this is the best decision to make for myself and everyone else, so I kind of have to do it. But it is good to know that he wasn't just giving up. He really just didn't have a choice, right? So Kuroko and Amine finally find Akashi. He's shooting alone in the gym, very similar to how he does with Rakuzan. And Amine grumbles. He's like, we've been looking all over for you and you were in the gym the whole time. It's really cute. But Akashi just wanted to ask Kuroko if Kisei's attitude was better on the team, and reveals that he's really good at telling what Kuroko is thinking because Kuroko wears his emotions so openly. Which is so interesting, because when we first meet Kuroko, he's very closed off, withdrawn, and hard to read. But that's all from him like withdrawing his emotions so that he can use his misdirection easier. It's interesting, right? And so at that point, Kuroko reveals that he's really close with him and Amine, and Akashi notes that, you guys are close, and reveals that he's been following him since the stamp rally that was back in the other novel and the other audio dramas, and how Kuroko has tried to show his gratitude to Amine and that Akashi has noticed it. And then the day after the next practice, Kisei suggests that all of them go and get ice cream together, and it's the famous ice cream scene that we've seen time and time again in the anime and the manga and the OVAs. It's that famous scene. So Midorima is shown walking with Akashi and asking, this is the part that gets me at the end of the chapter, because I was like, okay, Akashi's connecting with Kuroko and Amine. That's really cool. He's suggesting that they go get ice cream and stuff. They should go hang out. What's sad is that Akashi doesn't hang out with any of them, which is sad. But the creepy part of this episode, the creepy part of this chapter, is that Midorima is shown walking with Akashi at the end of the chapter, and he asks what his meeting with Kuroko was about. And Akashi says cryptically, there's nothing. He talks basically about, what he told Kuroko about misdirection and everything. And these are the last two lines of the chapter. There's nothing wrong with attaching importance to friendship, but when there is a violation of the basketball club's philosophy, I wonder what he will do. Meaning that they're talking about them all hanging out and being friends, and it seems like Akashi doesn't want to get close to everybody like that because he's afraid, like, what will that do to our policy about always winning? Like, the power of the Nakama is going to be stronger than the power of victory. It had that vibe to it. And it says, at the same time as the whisper under the bangs rising with the wind, no one saw the cold light flash in Akashi's eyes. It's like previewing that villain Akashi is coming. It's like previewing that Akashi is a villain under the surface is how that ends. Like what? It just previews that Akashi is like, we can't be friends. There will be no Nakama here because then we won't be focused on winning if we're all buddies. And it's like, whoa, calm down, sir. It is a middle school game. Nobody, your coaches are not going to kill you if you don't win. You're not on scholarship there. It's fine. But yeah, that chapter was really interesting. I liked it a lot. I liked the idea of them going around trying to find Akashi, and the part with Nijimura was really fascinating. Mm-hmm. So chapter 2 is a chapter I could not find. It is described as the chapter taking place on holiday before Winter Cup. Kagetora was developing a certain suspicion about his darling daughter Riko's behavior, and so it says, in order to confirm the suspicion, the most frightening father makes his move. I tried to find this chapter online in the manga Replace Plus series. I tried for like a whole day just scouring the internet off and on, being like, where is it at? Couldn't find anything. So I'm really sad. It said there was going to be manga chapters listed, but they were not. I was very sad about it because I wanted to read the chapter, but if anybody finds the chapter and which chapter it is, let me know, and I will try to read it and talk about it with either the manga or the other novels. But I couldn't find it, which it sounded really cool. I want to see Kagetora try to make bad decisions about his daughter and misunderstanding things. Speaking of misunderstanding, the last light novel, the chapter about Taiga and Himuro, was not my favorite. It was kind of convoluted and it was weird. It felt very similar to the haunted house chapter. It just wasn't as cohesive as I would have liked, and it was kind of repetitive. And it wasn't my favorite chapter. This one, Don't Go Alex, is amazing. I love this chapter so much. It's really, really good. It's really good. There's a lot of quotes from it that I want to say because the way that it's worded, the way the translation is, it was so well done. I was so invested in Alex and Kagami and Himuro that this coming of age story in this chapter is so well done. It's worth the read alone. This is probably my favorite chapter out of all of them. The chapter starts talking about Kagami and Himuro's adventures from the last volume where they went off on their own for 2 days and 1 night. Basically, they were grounded for 2 months before they could hang out with Alex again. I feel like their families were being pretty reasonable with that. They're grounded for 2 months. Kagami, we find out in the opening parts of the chapter, he's one that's really quick to learn and he wants instant understanding, which ties so much to his personality. He instantly wants communication. He wants to resolve the problem, wants to get to the bottom of it and move on. I am the same way. So me and Kagami relate a lot. I'm just a Taurus and he's a Leo. But Himuro is a lot more diligent and takes his time in thinking things. So him and Kagami, the chapter sets up that even as middle schoolers, they are very different on their wavelengths of communication, right? So Himuro tells Kagami that he thinks he's noticing Alex acting differently. Now, Kagami doesn't notice anything at all. There's a really cute segment where Kagami thinks, he's like, well, she just looks the same, like, as always. And Himuro's like, she's changed on the inside. And Kagami's like, how? It's like, it felt very like Kagami's such a himbo in that scene. It's really, really cute. And so they think back to the day prior and they recall that she runs into like a guy on the court. And it's really kind of sad. The guy on the court calls her like an ordinary woman and says that she's just ordinary now that she's retired from the WNBA. And it's really sad, but she beats him on the court one-on-one, and the boys think that that's so cool. They're like, she was so cool. She kicked his butt even after he said that. But it is kind of sad to see that Alex gets a lot of stigma for being a retired member of professional basketball. And I'm like, dude, unless you're a pro player too, don't be getting on to her. She was in the freaking WNBA. Like, shut up, right? So Kagami and Himuro, they think she was really cool. Himuro thinks it's something more subtle, but this part of the novel is amazing because Kagami doesn't understand what the word subtle means. Surprising no one. But he's a middle schooler, so his vocab is not the best. And Himuro gets really impatient with him. He's like, are you freaking kidding me? So he asks Kagami if he's ever seen Alex, quote, as a woman before. And Kagami says no. So there's this segment. Of course he knew that Alex was a woman, but to him, she was just his and Himuro's coach. In Kagami's mind, that didn't have anything to do with gender or age. Kind of tying to how they view Rico in the present. Of course, he knew that Alex was a woman. Once a classmate asked, your basketball coach is a woman, isn't that difficult? Kagami's first reaction wasn't to be angry. He said, oh, that's right, Alex is a woman. So yeah, it's like Kagami was clueless when it came to Alex's gender. But as Himuro pointed out, even coaches have genders. So I like that. I like that Kagami doesn't really see gender. He's like, oh yeah, she's a woman. Oh, I just thought she was our coach. But it also points to the fact that the other boys around Kagami are starting to go through puberty. They're starting to notice things. And they're like picking up on stuff about Alex. And Kagami's like, what are we picking up? Like he doesn't get it, right? Doesn't understand it at all. And so then said the only reason you don't notice is because Alex doesn't act like a woman. So in order to move easier, Alex usually wore t-shirts and jeans. She doesn't wear makeup because she claimed that wiping it off after sweating was a lot of trouble. Truth. Because of her sore shoulders, she doesn't wear a bra at home. Now that I'm like, okay, when Kagami and Himuro came over, she wouldn't cover herself, even though it made Himuro embarrassed. So Kagami doesn't even care. Kagami doesn't even notice. He's not attracted to her at all. Not attracted to women at all either. But Himuro notices. So Himuro, a bisexual king? I think could be. But Himuro notices. He notices and gets embarrassed. Finally, Himuro concluded that if it wasn't as if Alex didn't care about her appearance, it was just that she wasn't showing her womanly charm, which led him and Kagami, though mostly Kagami, not to realize their coach was a woman. And Kagami's like, okay. Himuro leaned in. What I'm going to say next is the most important. Taiga, what would you think if Alex started wearing perfume? Alex, she wouldn't do that. She did today. What? She wore perfume today. Really? When she stood up on the bench, I smelled it. So that's why I thought it. What's happened to Alex? So Himuro thinks that Alex is acting more and more like a woman around them, though it could be that they're just growing up and noticing it for the first time, but we'll touch back on that. And Kagami doesn't quite see it that way, so I really like that distinction. We learn that Alex loves to watch Japanese anime. She doesn't care what type. She's rewatched all of her favorites over and over again and has picked up some of the vocabulary and can speak Japanese fluently, but her English and Japanese sometimes mixes, and it sounds really weird. So they follow Alex, since she canceled practice early on today, to discover what she's been up to, and they find her with a guy. Now, across the street, she's at a little white church, and I was like, what are we doing? And she's standing in front of it. Kagami and Himuro were shocked. They both stared at the person next to Alex, speaking to her fondly. He was tall and wore a blue suit as he accompanied Alex. To Kagami and Himuro, he seemed to be under 30 years of age, had short, dark brown hair, blue eyes, and wore a gold watch. No matter how they looked at it, they could see he was definitely a man old enough to work. I like how that's how the middle schoolers understand the situation. Alex and the man stopped in front of the store next to the church. The man gentlemanly held the door for her. She smiled and said something before entering. The man followed behind her. Kagami and Himuro were frozen, but then quickly crossed the street and looked in through the window. They could see diamond necklaces, pearls, and other ornaments. They looked at each other. Alex had gone into a jewelry store with a man. Suddenly, it clicked as they both came to the same conclusion, yelling at the same time. Boyfriend! So the two of them think that she's acting the way she does because now she's had a boyfriend, and that's why she's being different. And so Kagami recalled the man's image. He wore a suit and looked very gentle. He was thin and a little shorter than Alex. And so Himuro's like, well, he kind of dismisses. He's like, well, why is she dating somebody like that? And Kagami says, well, people come in many types. Maybe this type is not bad. Which I'm like, you end up liking a guy shorter than you. So of course you would say that. And so Himuro recalled the basketball gamblers. It said they had average height of 2 meters and most of them had dark skin and huge muscles is what he describes there. And so he's saying that that's not Alex's type, apparently. He's like, well, this guy doesn't look like a basketball player. What's the point of dating someone like that? And then Kagami responds with, well, maybe she doesn't care if her boyfriend plays basketball or not. Maybe he has another area he's good at. Well, what kind of area? Well, I don't know, but there must be a reason that Alex is attracted to him. I like how open-minded Kagami is. Himuro is just like, well, why wouldn't she date a basketball player? Like, they have nothing in common. And Kagami's like, well, maybe she likes him for a different reason, and it's totally cool. I like how open-minded Kagami is in this moment. It's really well done, and it's very cute. And finding out Himuro is kind of, like, put off by this is interesting. So, Himuro and Kagami, they get worried that Alex potentially is going to get married to this guy because they're next to a church. And Kagami panics, thinking that they won't be together anymore if that happens. Which is really, really cute. It's so sad because he's like, well, Alex is going to leave us and then we're not going to be next to her. And it's like, we know where this is going, right? So he says they won't be together if that happens. Kagami gets Himuro to agree to help him ask Alex if she's married because he's afraid to ask alone. I like that Kagami is already being direct and trying to get to the root of things immediately. He doesn't want to just leave this to chance and be like, oh, well, maybe we'll find out later what's going on. He's like, no, we need to get to the problem right now. But there's this point here. Himuro notes how Kagami's trust and confidence were Himuro's weaknesses, which is interesting. Himuro had also thought about simply confronting Alex. However, he had only saw Alex as a coach before, and now he began to view her as a woman. In addition, to ask her if she was going to get married required some courage. It was a delicate question. When should he ask? What kind of expression should he make? Himuro couldn't make up his mind, so he gave up on the idea. Even though Kagami had asked him to, he didn't plan on asking. Himuro took a peek at Kagami, who was still looking at him. A feeling of guilt flooded his heart. However, he suddenly remembered something that Alex had said. Alex had told him, don't let Taiga pressure you into doing something you're not comfortable with doing. And Himuro thought to himself, that's right, I should listen to Alex. And Himuro said, I won't ask. Why not? I like that. I like that Himuro feels constantly pressured by Kagami. That helps explain why he was so adamant about them separating. He's like, I gotta become my own man. I can't be pressured by you anymore, even though we're brothers. It makes a lot of sense, right? It's interesting. And I like the idea of Himuro is starting to see Alex as a woman, even though Kagami's like, what? So, upon hearing Himuro's refusal, Kagami's eyebrows drooped and he looked disappointed. Himuro felt his resolve shake. He took a deep breath to calm himself. There were a lot of reasons why he didn't want to do it, and he chose the simplest one to tell Kagami first. If we ask her, she'll want to know why we're asking. We can't just say, we saw you yesterday. So Himuro convinces Kagami to keep it a secret and see if Alex tells him anything about it. And so the following days, all these red flags start to appear. Like a priest shows up, there's a wedding cake set up, which was the big red flag. I was like, oh no, this could be serious. And then they see the man that they think is Alex's boyfriend talking with a friend of his about meeting Alex. And after affairs are over with, he talks that he's going to leave for New York. And the boys start freaking out. They're like, oh my God, they're going to get married. And Alex is going to follow this guy to New York and leave us. And so they, like you'd expect, they get super mad about all of it. And they actually tackle the guy to the ground. It's great. They basically get super mad about it. And they confront him. So it's interesting. They go in here at this point. They confront the boyfriend, and that's when Alex shows up. The two of them look to their coach and gasp, not because of the fact that she appeared, but what she wore. She wore a shiny A-line dress wrapped slimly around her waist, laces around her chest, and a diamond necklace around her neck. A veil covered her face. So Kagami and Himuro freak out. They tackle the boyfriend and his friend, and Alex has to break them up and explain what's going on. Which, it's a great scene. It's like the whole thing is like something out of like a 90s comedy. It's like Mrs. Doubtfire or something where they just like the pool tackle and all this. And they say, don't go, Alex. Kagami hugged her and raised his head up to talk to her. Don't leave us, Alex. It's super cute because Kagami begs her to stay and he explains her that. And so she finally explains. She's like, when Kagami's being super cute, she's like, okay, guys. She explains because of the dog, Alex, from the last story, the one that they were leading through the park, she's taking the dog back. And that's when she runs into the guy that they think was the boyfriend. He's a wedding photographer. He's a wedding photographer and he meets her and is like, oh my God, I need a model for my photo shoot. Could you be my model for this wedding magazine? And Alex was like, sure. And they were like, you started to pay attention to your hair and your skin. And she says, of course. The photographs are going to be in a book. I want to make sure I look as good as I can. And then Himuro says, you were wearing perfume. We were surprised. And she's like, I was not wearing perfume. And Himuro's like, but your scent changed. And I'm like, and she goes, really? She's like, oh, that was the sunscreen I was wearing. She's like, I bought it a long time ago, but I didn't apply it till now. You guys probably think it smells strong because I don't normally wear it. Himuro was speechless. Kagami asks them, what about the wedding cake you were staring at yesterday? She's like, oh, I just wanted to eat it. So she gets onto them for thinking, she's like, you guys think too much. Like, come on. She's like, they sort things out. And she's like, I expected this from Kagami, that he would draw the wrong conclusions, but she's like, I didn't expect it from you. And since Himuro was the one that brought it up to begin with. And she's overall just amused that they're concerned. But I'm sorry. The ending of this chapter is amazing. It's the cutest and most interesting thing. So the friend of the photographer says, this is a rare opportunity. I'll get the camera. Like, let's take a picture. And Alex is like, yeah, let's take a picture of just me in the wedding dress and you guys beside me. So Kagami, who had been angry just moments before, gets very excited. He's like, oh, really? But Himuro turns his head away. And Alex says, Tatsuya, don't you want to do it? And then Himuro, he doesn't respond, but he clutches her dress and he's like, crouch down. And she's like, what? He's like, just crouch down. She's like, okay. Alex crouched down, watching Himuro carefully. He cupped his mouth in his hands and leaned forward and whispered into her ear, you're beautiful. And Alex was surprised, but before she could respond, Himuro had moved away. And she was like, well, that was... And he's like, I didn't want someone else to make me say it. If I want to say it, I will. Himuro said, his ears turning red. And she's like, oh, well, thank you, said Alex, half embarrassed, half happy. She leaned forward and hugged the two children. Wait a minute, Alex, what are you doing? The coach is very fortunate to have such silly disciples. So that plays into the whole thing with Himuro when he confronts her at the game and he's like, you're not my mom. You're not this. I'm like, did Himuro have a crush on Alex? Because I think he did. I think, of course, because Kagami and Himuro are polar opposites. Kagami does not even remotely think of Alex romantically at all. And Himuro had a crush on her. The thing where he's like, you're beautiful. I was like, that's so sweet. Where she's just like, okay. Like, oh, you silly kids. That's the sweetest thing. I was like, that is so, so cute. I freaking loved it. Mm-hmm. So we have chapter 4, which is the Phantom of the Library Committee. Now this chapter talks about Seirine in the summer. Of course, Kagami, starting out the chapter, is with Matobe, because why not? And apparently it's insanely hot, and which can relate. Today is like, it was scorching hot outside. The locker room, the boys are complaining that they should be allowed to either change outside or open up a door, but apparently the football team or soccer team or whatever had complaints because they opened up the door to the locker room and some girls saw them. And what's funny is the guys in this chapter are like, oh, well, if Riko just saw us, she wouldn't care. Which is hilarious and also true. It's really funny. So Hyuga, of course, interrupts, being like, let's not talk about Riko, and tells them to hurry up, and just casually drops that we've never seen inside of Matobe's locker. And I'm like, why, series, do you keep bringing up this mystery if you're not going to show us the locker? Why do you bring up Matobe's locker if you're not going to show it to us? So the chapter takes place before the Winter Cup, as Kuroko and Furihara tell Hyuga they have a library committee meeting that they're supposed to go to. The manga has told us that they're on the library committee. And Kogane, who is in a mood to share secrets, suddenly tells them about the 7 wonders of Seirin High School, and one of them being in the library. I was like, we're having a Hanako-kun crossover, right? So apparently at the end of the library, there's a preparation room, and it has no air conditioning. But why is it cool all year round then? He's like, because there's a story. And the Kuroko's super excited because he likes ghost stories. Furihara wants nothing to do with it. Furihara is like, Kagami, he's like, absolutely not. No. So they end up leaving Kagane. They're like, we don't want to know the ghost story right now. We'll find out later, whatever. And they go to the library committee meeting, and they are tasked by the committee to reorganize all of the books. And Kuroko says to Furihara that he's putting 120% of his efforts into hopefully reading his list of summer books, which Furihara is impressed by. So there is a tie-in that's kind of cool there. It ties in, we found out in the last couple light novels that Kuroko likes mystery novels, and detective stories, so it kind of ties back into that, which is pretty cool. And so Azuki shows up looking for a book called Office Worker Senryu. It's a manga. I tried to really quickly look up Office Worker Senryu. I couldn't find anything about it, so I don't know if it's real or if it's a made-up thing. Kuroko doesn't think that the library has it, but apparently Kiyoshi, Teppei, recommended it to Azuki. So they exchange some puns, do all that, and Kuroko gives him this form to fill out so they can buy it for the library. And then, speak of the devil, Teppei shows up with these rakugo tapes. It's a Japanese folk art performance using humorous words and actions in addition to an interesting ending to make the audience laugh. And Azuki seems kind of interested in the rakugo tapes, so he ends up abandoning the book and taking those instead. And we learn that even though Kuroko reads a lot of books over the summer, Hyuga reads even more. So I kind of like that Hyuga's kind of a bookworm. I could see Hyuga reading a lot of history novels and getting with those, historical fiction maybe. So they run into Matobe, who wants them to put up a warning sign about the heat stroke. And I love that. I forget that he's on the health and wellness committee at the school. And it's kind of cool that Matobe is the one that wants to take care of the team and be concerned for them health-wise. I think that's really cool. So Kagane shows up afterwards, and he praises Kuroko and Furihara for communicating with Matobe, who still has not spoken a word. And both of them are so confused. They're like, did we actually talk with him? Did that actually happen? And then Tsuchida stops by and notes that communication to Kogane means something different than everybody else, and he's probably never heard him talk either. And so that's when Kogane tells them the ghost story of the 7th wonder of Seirin. Not Hanako-kun, but an apparition. And the passage from the story reads, "This is a story before the summer vacation of last year. The rumors about the library being cooling for all seasons, how it circulated long ago. 2 boys skipped their classes to hide in the preparation room because they thought it would be best hiding spot since it was often empty. Just as the 2 were about to talk about high school, they were suddenly sleepy. Time flew by quickly, and without them knowing it, one of the boys woke up. The morning rays filtered in, but the room was cooling. However, the boys were sweating profusely. It was obviously not hot, but they continued sweating. It was even hard to breathe. In their confusion, the one boy tried to find his friend. At that moment, he realized, why did his friend vanish? Why was he sweating so much? But he already understood. He just wasn't willing to face reality. Actually, when he woke up, he'd already heard it. The sigh that came from the cement ground, the bloodied hands of his friends clutching onto his legs, refusing to let go. And then Furihara gets like shocked and jumps up and like falls behind, and he like flees behind Kuroko. It's really funny. But yeah, so of course Furihara is freaked out after the ghost story, even though he seems to be the only one. Everybody else is just like, oh, haha, it's a ghost story. We find out later on in the chapter that Riko had borrowed a lot of books on athletics, but they noticed one of the books was about cooking. And Furihara jokes with Kuroko that apparently Riko has a feminine side. And we find out this is before the first summer camp where she cooks for them. And they both laugh and agree to keep it a secret. And it's noted in the novel chapter, a few days later, before both of them could witness Riko's delicious cooking, they would have a taste of her dangerous cooking first. And I was like, ah! I love that they're both like, just like they're getting off on her being like, oh, she has a cooking book, ha ha ha. And I'm like, oh, you're laughing now. But when she actually makes the dish, it's going to be a different story. But it's great. So after that moment, they have a first-year practice game. According to Tepe is the one that proposed it. All the starters were changed to be first years. And for the first game, Furihara, Kawahara, and Fukuda don their uniforms and debut on the court. They were nervous, but the result of the match was not too bad, and Riko gave them a passing evaluation. And so that's when Furihara's like, I feel like Kagami is really amazing and kind of overshadows us. And so he confronts Kagami and Kuroko after practice and asks like why they're practicing apart, because at this point they're not practicing together. It's after they lost against Toho. And we know about the training from the anime and manga. Furihara also thinks about how Kuroko would not talk about himself most of the time. But the fact that he rejects the Generation of Miracles doctrine is something that everyone knows. So Kuroko doesn't talk a lot about his past yet, until the manga we're at right now, but he does reject their doctrine. And Furihara also knows that Kuroko is once hated basketball and thought of giving up. Kuroko tells him, quote, I don't know whether this counts as an answer. No matter how tiring it is, I want to continue playing basketball because right now, with Seirine and everyone, I want to play basketball with all of you. When we win, I want to slap our palms together and high five with everyone. When we lose, I want to bear the regrets together. This kind of mutual trust between teammates exists. That's why I want to play basketball with the coach, Captain Izuki-senpai, Matobe-senpai, Kogane-senpai, Tsuchida-senpai, Kiyoshi-senpai, Furihara-senpai, Kawahara, Furihara-kun, Kawahara-kun, Fukuda-kun, and with Kagami-kun. So Furihara wonders if he'll actually get to play an official game in the Winter Cup and isn't sure why Kuroko would want to play with him. And that's when Kuroko says, I want to go onto the court with Furihara-kun again because playing basketball with Furihara is fun. At that moment, Furihara was called by the teacher in charge of the library and he left Kuroko to go over. Thank goodness he was called over, Furihara thought, or I would have embarrassed myself crying in front of him. Is it okay to always stay the same? He would ask himself sometimes. It's not like he wanted to become a professional basketball player. Why does he still tire himself half to death with training? Strictly speaking, he chose to play basketball because of his will. Of course he likes basketball with the teammates he has now. But giving all this time to basketball, is it wise? I love that. I love that kind of like idea of Furihara debating like, is it worth it to play basketball? And Kuroko saying that he's playing it to play with them because it's fun is like that, gives it that meaning. And it's so, so good. I love it so much. So Furihara sounds invigorated and he's determined to give it all. And it's right about that time he hears a loud sighing or sobbing. The translation's kind of weird. Coming from behind a door, and he thinks it's the ghost library. And so he freaks out and he rushes to get others to prove that there's a ghost. And then it turns out the sighing was from Kagami, who was frustrated because he had to take remedial classes to play in the Winter Cup. So luckily, though, Kagami did not know about the ghost story, or I think Kagami would have freaked out just as much as Furihara. But I love in the end, Kagami praises Furihara, and it's super cute. Like, Kuroko steps in and is like, hey, Kagami, that's really cute that you're praising Furihara, but you need to focus on your grades so you can play with us. And Kagami's like, mind your own business. It's just, it was really super cute. And I like that we had some Furihara focus because he needs it. I love his character, and I'm glad we're going to see more of it in the Winter Cup. But yeah, it was just really sweet. And so that leads us to chapter 5, which is the Legendary brave leader Akashi. I actually really like this chapter. This chapter is really, really good. I liked the visual art with it of them all playing cards. It's cool that we have Rakazan focused, right? We're getting a short story chapter on Rakazan. Great. Always here for it. So it starts out with Mabuchi and Hayama talking about, I love that it starts out with just like a random conversation you'd have in the lunchroom. Like, if you've ever been in school and in a lunchroom with people, the conversation goes like 20,000 different ways, and half the time it doesn't make any sense. And so they're sitting there talking about how in any like fantasy story, the prince always rides a white horse, which is Nabuya is like, what are you talking about? And they tell him that, and he's like, well, Akashi has a white horse. And they're like, how do you know this? And he's like, oh, well, Akashi told me about his hobby, riding horses on the weekends. And I'm like, okay. And it instantly made me want to see a Haikyuu crossover where Akashi and Ushijima, because Ushijima canonically rides horses for like the horse riding club at Shiratorizawa. So I'm like, I want to see Akashi and Ushijima like riding horses together, and I want to see them have conversations together. I want this so very badly, and I want Tendo like off with Mayuzumi driving him crazy. I need this in my life. Although Tendo and Mabuchi would get along swimmingly. So yeah, I absolutely love it. So apparently his family has a horse riding grounds and spots at the Kyoto horse arena, which I'm like, that's pretty bougie if you have your own riding grounds and you have spots stalled in an arena, because that costs money to rent out. So yeah. And Mabuchi notes that Akashi is an extreme person. And I'm like, oh my God, that's understatement of the century. Yes, an extreme person. Hayama tells the other players that he heard a rumor Akashi has never lost at anything. And the others are unsure about this, and then Akashi himself shows up. Akashi in this chapter is ridiculous. He declares that yes, he's never lost and his victory is absolute. So Hayama's like, well, let's test this theory. Let's test it. So they decide to challenge Akashi in their own special way and see if he can beat them. The first thing is this one here. The other two, I understand why he won. It's luck, whatever. But the first challenge is arm wrestling against Nabuya. Arm wrestling Akashi versus Nabuya, the character whose entire arc has been about becoming stronger physically to battle with Tepe. Now, Akashi wins against Nabuya. Because of his Emperor Eye. Or that's what he says. They say his Emperor Eye helped predict his opponent's move. I'm like, this is arm wrestling. This is the move. There are no other options. Your point is to go one way or the other. There's no strategy. It's just brute strength and boom, I won. I'm like, what move? And also I'm like, how does foresight beat physical strength? Superpowers. That part of the chapter, it took me out for a second because I was like, that's BS, but okay. So now Hayama picks the next game. And that is a game called Nirameko. It's a game where you basically like make silly faces at one another and you try to like stone face and don't laugh, and whoever laughs first loses. So Hayama tries to make Akashi laugh, doesn't work. And Mabuchi makes Nabuya leave with him and leaves Hayama with Akashi because Nabuya's like, what are you doing? And Mabuchi's like, if I see Akashi laugh, I will never be able to take him seriously on the court again. It's all I'll be able to think about. So I can't see it. Which is interesting, right? But also a cop-out because at that moment, they hear Hayama laugh like insanely and say that he just saw the funniest thing ever. So we were denied seeing Akashi make someone laugh. Cruelty. Not even fair. So Mabuchi's the last one, and his strategy is pretty simple. It's to play poker. I like that Nabuya is raw strength, Hayama's is comedy, and Mabuchi is strategy. Like his thing is to play like poker. So like just Texas Hold'em. And so while they're playing, they're trying to find a way to break the silence because it's really quiet and tense. And so Mabuchi starts asking he's like, well, Akashi, while we got you here, how about you talk about your middle school days? Like, what was it like with your team in middle school? And Akashi gives like the ultimate pageant queen answer. Because we know as the audience, all of the trauma that has gone down at Teiko and everything Akashi's been involved in, And here's his answer. I had a pleasant time in school and I was blessed with good friends. What? That's your answer? That's how middle school was? You had a pleasant time? People were crying and sobbing and going through the biggest trauma of their lives. I'm like, if that is not a coping mechanism answer of like the ultimate repression, I'm like, what? So then they ask what the Generation of Miracles were like. And Akashi says, they were an interesting confederation, although their abilities were far too advanced and it was difficult to deal with them, but they each had their own charm. What? So he says, smiling, recalling the past. And they ask him if it was tiring being a coach of such individuals. And he says, quote, it wasn't so bad. There were conflicts at first, but there was quite a mediator amongst them, meaning Kuroko was the mediator. And I'm like, there were conflicts at first? There were conflicts throughout the whole damn series. I was like, wait, what? No. And so then Kuroko is cited as being the one that broke up all the fights and was the mediator. Now, Akashi says Kuroko is not a generation of miracles. He's different from us, and that's why he has meaning. And Mabuchi notes a change in Akashi's tone with that. So, according to them, Kuroko is not a generation of miracles, which affects my entire ranking system. How dare. So, I guess I can't count Kuroko as a generation of miracles because Akashi says he's not. And his victory is absolute. He's always right. So, for those of you saying Kuroko was not a generation of miracle player, apparently y'all are right. Because Akashi says so. So, in any case, Akashi just hints that hopefully they'll see him later on in the year at the Winter Cup. Who knows? Who knows if we'll get to that point. So the bell rings before they can finish their game, and Akashi says he's leaving for home. It was before they finished the card game, but they flip over Akashi's hand, and it's an ace of diamonds, ace of hearts, ace of clubs, ace of spades. He has a full house. And the final line of the chapter is, it was on this particular afternoon in June that the trio discovered a newfound fear and respect for their captain, who still does not know defeat. Yeah, I like the Rakuzen chapter a lot. I was just like, Akashi, my dude, some of this is BS, but whatever. We'll let it slide, I guess. So then the final Omeke chapter is about the Teiko girls meeting. So it's set up like that last chapter was in June at Rakuzen. This one is set up of April of the second year. And Momoe and there's two other girl managers nicknamed Achan and Michan, who are in the laundry room and they're talking about boys that they think are cute. So they're in middle school talking about boys that they think are cute. And so one girl, Michan, talks about her run-in with Akashi, which is in the manga. Michan is the girl that has the basket of laundry that Akashi helps out, and she thinks he's super cute. But the other girls, they know that he has kind of like this intimidating aura that makes him hard to approach. And so they don't know if he's the cutest or not. And Momoe is not, they ask Momoe who her like crush on the team is, and she can't answer because of course the series is going to be a damn tease. And so the other girls start to guess. They're like, well, what about Midorima? He's really like mysterious and gentlemanly. But then they're like, he talks above our heads, so we're not sure about him. I'm like, yes, no. Midorima would like talk above them, not afraid of it. Then they talk about Almine. Now, they tease that Almine isn't very smart, and they cite this like moment from grade school where he like thought crayfish grew up to be lobsters. And that was so funny because I had a friend in high school that when we were in middle school, she thought that my friend's pony was going to grow up to be a horse. And my friend had to be like, no, ponies stay ponies and horses stay horses. And she's like, oh, he'll grow up to be a horse. And he was like, So it's kind of one of those situations. But the thing about it is they say he's a ganguro, which is kind of a slang term for someone with dark skin. I don't know if it's meant to be as offensive as I think it is, but it was kind of uncomfortable to read. I was like, I don't know, because they were using it in a negative connotation. They're like, oh, well, he's a ganguro, so I don't know. I was like, I don't know if I feel good about this. This feels a little bit problematic. But then they note that Almine is tall and handsome and good at basketball, so it balances out. And I'm like, girls, stop. They consider Murasaki Bara because he's mischievous and good at basketball, but the two girls make note that they are not attracted to Haizaki. He has a bad attitude, doesn't fly. And so Momoe hadn't developed a crush on Kuroko yet, so she doesn't know her answer, and the girls are like, well, you kind of have weird taste in men, so you probably just don't know. And then it cuts to a month later, and Momoi comes up and she's like, girls, I just have a new crush. He's just joined the first string of the basketball team. And they're like, oh, I love they instantly assume it's Kisei. And they're like, oh, well, girl, you're going to have to get in line because he's got like a line of other girls crushing on him. And then the end of the novel says, Momoi is like, no, it's Kuroko who I'm fangirling about. The one who recently got his uniform. He's so handsome. The duo furrowed their brows and questioned if he was handsome. Yeah, and he's good at basketball. He's so cool. Good at basketball. Isn't he the one that's always vomiting during practices? I love the boy. She's like so delusional. She's like, he's so good at basketball and so cool. And the other girls are like, didn't he just like vomit in the corner last week? And they're like, she's like, he's a totally different person in matches. Isn't that cool? Now I understand the meaning of the word contrast. And they're like, well, we can never tell what Kuroko's thinking. She's like, that's the point. He has an air of mystery. I finally understand what you two meant. Tetsu is so cool. And she was like swaying side to side, like fangirling. And the girls are like, what happened to her in 1 month? We'll never understand Satsuki's understanding of handsome guys. Your tastes are really strange. Again, this series is all about like the Aomine, Kuroko, Momoi, like love triangle. And it's so fascinating to me. But yeah. This light novel was really, really good. I had a lot of fun reading this one. The Alex story was my favorite. I loved it. It's so good to get inside Himuro's head and see him like going through adolescence and puberty and like starting to notice girls. And Kagami's just oblivious. He still is oblivious. It's great. But I really liked all of these. If you know the manga chapters I missed for the second chapter, comment them down below. But I hope you get a chance to go look at the light novel. It's really good. I enjoyed it, but we've got 2 left, y'all. 2 more light novels to go, and I'm super excited. So, huzzah! But in any case, I'm gonna go read light novel 5 next, and talk about it, and go look at some comments to talk about the manga chapters this next week, and go from there. So, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope to see your comments down below, but in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with Kuroko's Basketball, the 5th light novel. Bye!